Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something huge, a document that literally hit the brakes on one of the most significant global conflicts in modern history. The text of the 2026 US Iran War Memorandum of Understanding, which CNN just published in full, is dense, it's highly consequential, and yeah, it's packed with a lot of complex diplomatic legalese. But hey, that's why we're here. We're going to break it down. We're stripping away all that jargon to look directly at what this legal document actually mandates for both the United States and Iran. Whether you follow Middle Eastern geopolitics every day or you're just trying to figure out how this peace was actually brokered, we're going to make the whole thing crystal clear.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the historic memorandum, the core ceasefire conditions, military and nuclear terms, economic repercussions, enforcement and oversight, and finally, the path forward. Let's get right into it. Part 1, the historic memorandum. So, it's absolutely crucial to acknowledge the immense global weight of this text right out of the gate. This isn't just your standard run-of-the-mill diplomatic cable. It's a legally binding framework designed to pause a major international conflict. The preamble sets these high stakes immediately. It states, the respective parties, recognizing the catastrophic regional and global toll of active conflict, mutually and legally bind themselves to an immediate, verifiable, and comprehensive cessation of all kinetic hostilities. Basically, this lays down the foundational rule. Before anybody sits down to negotiate about troops or sanctions, the actual shooting, the kinetic hostilities, must legally stop across the board.
Moving on to Part 2, core ceasefire conditions.
Now, a preamble is really just words on a page without a schedule to back it up, right? To ensure the fighting actually stops on the ground, the text maps out an exact phased timeline. In high-stakes diplomacy, trust is practically non-existent, so the agreement relies entirely on simultaneous compliance. Day 1 mandates the complete implementation of the ceasefire across all fronts. Nobody moves until that is absolutely verified. Then, by day 30, the document legally requires the initial phased withdrawal of U.S. troops from forward operating positions, which is mirrored exactly by the demobilization of Iranian proxy forces. Then, and only if those steps are verified, day 90 triggers a joint review of sanctions and the initial unfreezing of assets. It's kind of like a highly choreographed dance. Every single step forward by one side requires a reciprocal step by the other.
Which brings us to Part 3, military and nuclear terms.
This is where the actual mechanics of the compromise are documented. To look at this objectively, we have to compare the obligations side by side. You see, the MOU is fundamentally a document of mutual concessions. On one hand, the text outlines the direct, binding obligations for the United States, specifically, a phased withdrawal of regional naval strike groups and a total cessation of targeted drone operations in designated zones. And, in return, we see Iran's reciprocal obligations, the immediate capping of all uranium enrichment activities, and the verifiable dismantling of specific advanced centrifuge arrays. The text makes it explicitly clear that these actions are permanently linked. One literally cannot happen with the other.
You know, you're going to see the term uranium enrichment caps heavily featured throughout this text. Let's translate that dense diplomatic legalese into plain English. An enrichment cap is essentially a strict, verifiable limit on how pure processed uranium can be. Think of it like a strict speed limit. The MOU dictates that the purity can only reach a level sufficient for civilian energy generation, like, say, powering a city. It specifically blocks the uranium from being concentrated to the much higher specialized purity levels required to build a nuclear weapon. This is a foundational pillar of the agreement's security guarantees. And the exact metric the MOU uses to enforce that rule, 3.67%. This is a critical figure explicitly written right into the text. It anchors abstract diplomatic promises into hard, actionable, and verifiable data. By committing to this specific number, both parties are agreeing to a mathematical threshold that international inspectors can actually measure in the real world. If a sample reads 3.68%, the agreement has been breached. It removes the ambiguity entirely.
Part 4, economic repercussions.
Okay, so diplomacy isn't just about military force. It's heavily driven by economics. According to the text, the MOU absolutely does not enact a blanket removal of all economic penalties. It's actually highly surgical. On one side, we have sanctions being lifted, primarily the unfreezing of $12 billion in international central bank assets and the resumption of civilian aviation trade. That's all designed to stabilize the civilian economy. But the text also explicitly states which sanctions remain firmly in place: comprehensive international arms embargoes, and targeted individual asset freezes on specific military leadership. So the MOU uses economic relief as an incentive, while keeping economic restrictions as an ongoing safeguard.
Part 5, Enforcement and Oversight.
Now, a memorandum of understanding is really only as strong as its ability to verify compliance and punish violations, right? The text establishes a very specific watchdog. It states, a joint international verification commission, led by impartial UN delegates and IAEA inspectors, shall maintain unhindered 24/7 access to all declared military and nuclear sites. This clause is huge because it establishes exactly who will be watching. It takes the burden of proof completely away from the United States and Iran and places it squarely on an independent international body that is authorized to conduct surprise inspections. So the million-dollar question is this: what happens if someone cheats? Well, the MOU text outlines real-world structural penalties that give this document its actual legal teeth. If the Oversight Committee detects a breach, the text mandates 3 immediate triggers. First, an automatic snapback of every single lifted economic sanction within 48 hours. Second, the immediate suspension of all mutual security guarantees, which essentially voids the ceasefire. And third, an immediate referral to the UN Security Council for multilateral action. There's no grace period outlined in the text here. These penalties are designed to be swift and totally automatic.
And finally, Part 6, the path forward.
Let's connect all these dense diplomatic terms directly back to your world. Here is the geopolitical so what. Why does the success or failure of this specific document matter deeply to our everyday lives? Because the terms written in this MOU dictate the security of major international shipping lanes, like the Strait of Hormuz, which controls a massive portion of the global oil supply. When the text enforces a ceasefire, it instantly impacts and stabilizes volatile global energy markets, and that trickles down to the price of goods everywhere. Furthermore, the mutual military drawdowns outlined here fundamentally rewrite the security architecture of the Middle East for the next decade, potentially preventing a wider multi-nation conflict. It's a real game changer.
We've unpacked the text, the timelines, the military caps, and the economic levers. We've seen exactly what both sides have legally agreed to on paper. But, paper is one thing. Reality is a whole other story. As we watch this historic agreement transition from the page out into the real world, the ultimate question remains: will the enforcement mechanisms of the 2026 MOU be robust enough to ensure lasting stability in the Middle East? It's a question that is absolutely going to define the geopolitical landscape for years to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep your eyes on how this historic text continues to unfold.